All right, so we're going to begin. This webinar is focused on shaping and editing. So we're going to look at our different stitch tools and how we can edit them and how we create specific shapes. So we'll go through a couple of the tools that we have here. And then as you guys have questions, just chat them in the chat box feature and I'll read through them and answer them as we go along. So the first thing to go through is in our Chroma Inspire, we have 3 different stitch types to use. They're located at the bottom left of our screen. So we have our run stitch, which is a single running stitch of threads. We have our classic satin stitch, which will be for smaller details or lettering. And so the way that we're creating this is a little bit different. We're creating a column and sort of moving around the screen by clicking left to right and moving downwards, or by clicking top to bottom and moving to the side. So we're like a train track motion. Then we have our complex fill, and our complex fill is going to be used for large areas of fill, and we can just click onto the screen and make any sort of shape that we'd like there. So we're using different stitch types for different details and areas on our design. And the way that we edit each of these stitch types is a little bit different. So when we select an object that we want to edit, we're going to highlight it first, and then we will click onto our shape tool. You can also see that if you hover over any of your tools, there will be a shortcut in parentheses. So if I wanted to quickly change to my shape tool, I could use the F9 key on my keyboard. So once I click onto the shape tool, you'll see a couple different points, dots, and outlines. So I have on the run stitch just the single outline, since it's a single running line of stitches. If I were to click on my classic satin, I can see that I have the pink outlines on either side, and then the complex fill again. So we have a couple different things that we can edit and adjust. So let's start with the run stitch. I have the pink outlines, and I can actually drag these outwards to make them curve. I can easily edit any sort of line that I want just by clicking and dragging where I want it to be. I can also change the actual points. So when we're looking at points, we're seeing either a blue circle or a blue square. And if you notice, I have a couple circles and a couple squares on this run stitch. And the circle is showing me that this line surrounding the circle is actually curved. If we look over here on the right top area, we have a square, and that's showing me that the line is straight. So I have a square point that's showing I have straight lines, and I have a circle point that's showing me I have a curve. So we can change the square point and we can move it around on the screen. And if I click on the circle point, you will notice that we have what's called a Bezier show. And this little sort of seesaw looking dotted line is going to allow me to adjust the curve of this point. So I'm adjusting the line that's in between the 2 circle points. And I have 2 Beziers that I can sort of adjust and move around. Anytime you make a change, you can easily right-click on the screen and it will show you your updated path. So I have circle points, I have square points, and then I also have a green and red dot, and what those are showing me is my start and stop points. So this shape is actually going to begin at the bottom left and it will end at the bottom right. And we can actually see that if we click on our slow redraw, and it will show us, it's very quick, it will show us that line stitch out. We can actually change our start and stop points. And so if I were to switch the red and green dot, I can have the red over here, the green over here, and we will see that the shape is actually going to begin on the opposite side. So the other thing that I can do to edit this shape here that I have is I can actually change any of these points. So if I actually wanted this point to be a sharp straight line, I can right click, I can change this to a line. So that now created a square point, and you can see that the line is a sharp corner. If I want this square point to actually be a curve, I can right click and change it to a smooth. And that's showing me now that I have a curved line. The other options that we have here are cusp and symmetrical. So when I'm right clicking on these points, I can change them quickly depending on what I need it to look like. So I just changed those from a line to a smooth and a smooth to a line. The cusp is actually going to show us that we have a Bezier that is now able to be edited in two different ways. So with this point here on the bottom of this U area, if I change that to a cusp, then I can actually edit each side of the Bezier separately. So I'm adjusting the left side, and then I can actually adjust the right side separate. If I change this point to symmetrical, then when I adjust that Bezier, both sides are going to adjust. So it's going to work in unison. So as I adjust either side, you can see both are changing. Okay? So we can change it to a line that makes it straight. We can change it to a cusp, or sorry, we would have to change it to a smooth. Now it's smooth. We can change it to a cusp where I adjust just one side of it. So you can see the left side is not moving. Or I can change it to symmetrical and have both sides move. Okay? So as you guys have questions, just chat them in the chat box here on the screen, and I'll take a look and answer them as we go. Another thing that we can do is we can actually add or delete points. So on the same shape here, if I want to better adjust the shape here, I could right click, add a point. I could right click, add a point, and now I have more ability to curve this line. So we can easily add as many points as we need on this shape. And I can also delete a point. So if I don't need, say, this point up at the top, I can easily delete it. And now I just have the two rounded anchor points there. So you can add, you can delete, and you can do so much editing with those points and outlines. Now that is just on the run stitch. So let's take a look at our other stitch types because there's a lot more involved with the thicker, the satin and the complex fill. So when I click on the satin with my shape tool, I do still see those pink lines, and those are my outlines. So I can still adjust the outline and I can pull it outwards, make it curve. I can also still change the points. Now we don't really see as many points here because they're just hidden by our angle line. So the angle lines are the yellow lines that are separated by black dots. And what those are showing us is the direction of the stitches. If I change this yellow line now to a very downward slant, if I right click to update my path, we're going to see that all those stitches are now slanting downwards. So these angle lines are showing us the direction of those satin stitches. And I can change it really any way I would like. Now, it's going to make sense to have these very consistent running through your shape. So I wouldn't really do something like that, but I just want to show you guys how you can adjust those lines. So when we first opened up this editing on this specific shape, we don't really see my points because they're hidden by the angle lines. So if I wanted to edit my points, I can actually right click kind of anywhere on the shape, and I can go to edit, and then I can choose outlines. And what that's going to do is it's going to hide all of the other colors and points and lines so that I only see the outlines. Now I can much better adjust and change the shape. So this is really going to allow me to focus on just one bit at a time. Now I can do the same thing if I right click, edit. If I just want to edit the angle lines, then it's just showing me the angle lines. And now you can see I don't have those blue points. That green and red dot are hidden, so they're just out of my way. And that way I can better adjust something that I need to adjust. So if we look at that one more time, I can also just edit my entry and exit. So we have a couple different ways to easily view what we want to change. And then same thing goes for the satin. If I wanted to change this point to a smooth, now I have that Bezier that I can adjust, and it will give me a nice curve. So we have that same option to right click, change it to a line, cusp, smooth, or symmetrical. Okay. The other options that we have in the satin, so we can still add or delete points. I can easily add a point here just to be able to further adjust and curve my shape. I can easily delete a point if I don't need something. I can delete. And we can also add more angle lines. The reason why we might add more angle lines is if we want something to, say, slowly curve around the shape, then I want to have more angle lines so that it knows how to slowly curve the stitches. So you can see I added a couple, and now the stitches are kind of curving around this shape. You can add, you can even delete the angle lines if you want to, say, start from scratch. You can delete all of them, and then you need to add them back because we need to know how the stitches should move. So we have a lot of similar options when editing the run stitch and the satin stitch. And so if we're, say, looking at more of a curved satin shape, that's where I would also want to have more angle lines to curve around a shape. So if we look a little bit further, have sort of a curved shape. Oops. And the way I'm curving this shape is I'm actually holding down the Control key. That's going to allow me to curve. So with this shape, you can right off the bat see that this actually has a lot more angle lines than my initial shape up here at the top. And that's because the shape is curving. So those yellow lines are showing that this direction needs to kind of curve with the outline. And if I just had, say, 1 or 2 angle lines here, it might actually look a little bit, let's actually, you put 1 here, 1 here. So it doesn't look bad, but we do want to kind of have plenty of lines there to sort of direct the stitches. So that's why you might add more. And it's really just on a case-by-case basis. Depending on the shape and the direction of that object, you can add more or delete them. So if I were to say add a couple more here, we can see that it's going to have a little bit of a nicer, cleaner stitch out. The stitches will be laying really nicely together. And so, you know, for me, I can see that that's a much better improvement just in the direction of the stitches, having more there. So let's take a look at the complex fill shape. And just as a review to kind of repeat everything we've looked at already, we have those pink or purple outlines. You can drag those out. You can say add points. So if I wanted to kind of make this a little bit of a different shape, I can add points. I can change any of my points. So this one here in the corner is a straight point. It's a line, and you can see that there's a really sharp corner. So I could easily change that to smooth, and now I have a curve. If I wanted to adjust the curve of this, and if I wanted it to be symmetrical, we can right click and make sure we choose symmetrical. And now when I change one side of the Bezier, both sides are moving. So I can easily adjust like that. If I change this to just a cusp, then I'm adjusting only one side of the Bezier, so I'm only on this left or bottom area, and the top Bezier works on its own. So now I can adjust this one separately. So anytime I'm making that adjustment, I'm just right-clicking on the point. So you're right-clicking and you're changing between these 4 options. So you can see we still have edit, so I can edit just the outlines that hid the red and green dot. It hid my angle line, and now I can just go with the lines or points and sort of make my change there. Anytime I'm making a change, you can just click onto the screen and it will show you your updated path. The other options that we have when we right click, so we have edit, we have add or delete points, and we have the changing of the points, so changing their style, and we have add hole. Now this is only available in a complex fill shape, so you won't see add hole on a satin or a run. When we click on add hole, it's going to allow us to draw a shape within our complex fill shape. And when I finish that shape off, it's creating a hole. So we can make a cutout. And this is helpful if, say, we have 2 complex fill shapes laying on top of each other. And if I wanted to save a couple stitches and ensure that my design isn't too dense and thick in one area, then I can easily add a hole right here and just cut out some of the stitches. So that's helpful just in that situation. And it's just cutting out a little area there. Okay. So we also have on our complex fill, we do have an angle line, and there will only be one. We can't add another angle line because those complex fill stitches are only going to go in one direction. So we can easily adjust it. We can adjust the angle if we want the stitches to be moving more slanted or at a 90-degree angle. We can change that there, but again, we just have one to work with in our complex fill shape. So we went through our editing, and we know all of our options now with editing our shapes. So let's actually take a look at creating specific shapes. And we're going to work on how we're creating nice circles and curves. And we can sort of go through how you're making a good shape just right off the bat. So we can easily freehand like draw on the screen just by using any of our stitch types. But if we want like a specific shape, let's say we want like a really nice rectangle or even triangle or perfect circle, we're going to use our artwork tool. The artwork tool is not creating any stitches, it's just creating a shape. So when we create a shape, a circle or an oval, we then need to make sure we digitize it. So this is where we're going to actually use our auto-digitizer tool. So the auto-digitizer doesn't just work with images that you pull in, it works with the artwork tool. If I have this open circle here and I click on the auto-digitizer in the top left corner, it's going to create a run stitch. So this is going to be helpful if I need to make small circles or dots, and this will create a perfect circle. So when I'm using that ellipse tool to make a perfect circle, you will hold down the Control key on your keyboard, and that will keep the height and width the exact same. So it keeps that aspect ratio. If I didn't hold Control, that's where I'm making an oval. If I want this to actually be a filled in oval, then I want to change this from an outline into a fill. If we look at the top right corner here, I have type and I can choose fill. So it's filling it in. It's going to fill it in with the green color. That's just my first color chip. And you will notice if we take a closer look, there is actually a black border on the shape. So underneath the type, we have fill. You can actually change the opacity. You can change the stroke width. So it's just essentially changing the like thickness of that border. And you can also change the stroke, or the stroke color is also that border. That's basically what it's referring to. So we can change the stroke color to match. So if I don't need that border, I can just match it, and then I can auto digitize, and we have now like a perfect oval shape in complex fill. So if I did want that border, let's use this as an example. We can fill it. We have that border, get a nice thick border, and I auto digitize. Then it's actually just making a little run stitch here. So the run stitch border, if you need it there, then that's great. But if you're hoping to achieve a thicker border, like a thicker line here, we have a different way that we can do that. And I'm going to show you this in a specific example. Would be if we want to create, say, a nice circle in a satin stitch. We can do this easily with our artwork tool. the way that we're going to do this is we're creating 2 circles. I have one here, I have another here, and I'm just going to make this a little larger. So I'm going to fill both of them in, and I actually don't need that stroke. I'm going to change this one to a different color. And I just want to place them right on top of each other. And then I do want them to be perfectly aligned. So we can select both, and we have little quick alignment tools at the top of our screen. So I'm going to horizontal align and vertical align. Now, if I select both of these here, so you can see I do have this nice like green border, it's pretty thick. If I auto-digitize that, it's actually going to give me a nice satin ring. So this satin ring of stitches, I can use this to make a patch, or just to kind of, if I wanted to make a bunch of circles, or if I'm making a sun, or any sort of shape that you want to be satin, you can do this with the little trick of you're just layering. So when you're layering shapes like that, the program will create, the middle and then the ring. So I could actually do that with, say, a rectangle if I wanted to, and it's just sort of making 2 separate shapes when you layer them. So we can fill it in, make complex fill, we can keep it as just a single line, make a run, or we can do a layering effect and make a satin. So it's just going to give you a couple different ways. Now, if you're seeing that you have a large shape like this, and you're trying to get a satin, but it's actually giving you a complex fill, then it just might be like the sizing that you're working with. So if I have this really large shape here and I click on auto digitize, it's going to make a complex fill just because it's a much larger area. So it won't default to that satin. But if we were to, say, shrink down the image, oops, not the right one. If we were to shrink down these circles, then it might actually give me a satin, which didn't that time. So we're just going to kind of play with it. So just keep in mind, getting a different stitch type, you can just kind of adjust the size. So as you saw there, I made these circles a lot smaller. They were about like an inch by inch, and it defaulted to satin instead of a complex fill. So just a couple tricks on getting the right stitch type that you want. So we have that artwork tool, and besides the rectangle ellipse, you actually have tons of other options here. So you can easily make, a hexagon or a heart. The star is really helpful, so you can make quick stars. And then just use your auto digitizer and fill it in as you need it. So you can make, a thick looking star, but that's probably going to just default to a run stitch. So we have a little run stitch star there. So any questions on the artwork tool or the stitch types here? And after we use the artwork, we can still edit the same way. So you can see on this circle, I have quite a few of those angle lines. And the reason why I have quite a few is because these satin stitches need to slowly curve around the circle. So that's why they're really nicely placed. I still have the start and stop point, so it's showing me that it's going to begin at the top and then kind of end in the same spot. I can still make any adjustment to the outlines or the points, so you can really like drag those around and make, you know, something kind of odd like that. And the other thing that I wanted to kind of discuss is so why you might want to change the start and stop points. And the best way to look at this is if we're creating some small shapes that are close together, we have a jump stitch. And a jump stitch is fine to keep if you have a small area, because you really don't want the machine to do lots of trimming if you have a bunch of small shapes next to each other. But as you can see, if I adjust the start point of this shape that's highlighted, it will actually change that jump stitch and make it a trim. And because it's just now, it's a little bit too far. This one, I could, you know, keep the start and stop point and just have a jump right here. And if I have the stop point here, then, you know, it's ending here and this object is starting here. So it's just showing you kind of like where one object ends, the other one starts. And if you adjust those points, then you'll have, say, a shorter jump stitch or none at all. So one thing that we can do to our shapes is we can actually change the fill type. When we have something selected, this orange circle here, we have in the upper right-hand corner a couple of our settings boxes. And if we look at the fill type, we just have standard, and then we have patterns. And this is where we can actually create some different type of pattern. Like the brick looks very different. If I zoom in here, we have this like interesting brick pattern, kind of like a basket weave. We have corn that works in like more of a rows. And we have different patterns, pattern 1. So it's just giving you a different type of fill. The one thing that you need to be cautious of is changing a complex fill into a satin pattern. So since I changed this really large circle into satin, it looks like this now. We only have a couple of actual stitches here. Like this will not stitch out on the machine. The reason why it shows up like this is because this shape, if I were to measure it, is about almost 3 inches wide. So a satin stitch is not going to be 3 inches long. It's just too wide, too long of a stitch, so the machine's not going to jump that far. If I were to actually shrink this down quite a bit, you can see that it does end up filling in. So your satin stitch, if you ever get something that looks like this, it just means that it's much too wide or large. The sweet spot is going to be like below 0.8 inches. So if I shrink this just a little bit, we're going to see it slowly fill in. The one thing that you also want to be cautious of is, so the nature of this circle, it is an original complex fill shape. I go to only have one angle line and I can't add more. So it's just giving me a couple different options as far as editing. And the other thing that you notice here is it does actually give me the option to, because the native the native stitch type of this object is complex fill, just with a satin pattern. Okay, so I can create something that looks like this and I just have that one angle line, and then I can create a hole. Whereas if I made this in a satin right off the bat, it would actually give me more angle lines and I would not be able to add a hole. So that is just a little kind of info on that. But as we can see, you can change the fill type to achieve different looks. So let's say we have an image and we want to now, draw around our image. So we kind of went through a little bit of our basic shaping. We went through our editing. So let's take a look at an actual image and talk about how we can create, specific. So let's do, I'm going to pull in this star image here, and we can see clearly that this was, it's a satin stitch here. But how do we create these shapes? So with our classic satin, we're always clicking side to side, moving down, or top to bottom, moving right. So think of it as a train track. You have to have each side, and it's going to connect in the middle. So if I wanted to create this star, the first thing that I would do is I'm going to actually make it into 5 shapes. We can see we have like a little triangle sort of shape at the top. Each point is separate. So if I need to make a nice point, I'm gonna click left or right really, really close together. I'm gonna zoom in quite a bit so we can see. So I'm clicking on the left, clicking on the right, and then I'm gonna move my way around the star. And so I can just click left, then right, and move my way down. I could actually click really far down. I can go all the way down here. I don't need to add that many points. So I can click all the way down, make sure we always go on each side. And then when I come to the point here in the center, I'm still going to click left, and then I need another point, so I'm just going to click it really, really close, just like that, and I finish it off. So you right click and it's finished. So if we look at that now, and of course it's much too large to be satin, so I would shrink it down, but giving you the idea of how we're shaping. So let's actually, we can make this a lot smaller. And that way we're just working on a small scale, and I can shrink this down to fit better. So we can easily make shapes like this. Let's say we wanted to make like a leaf type of shape manually. Like if we want to make this type of shape. So with my satin, I'm going to start at one area, the tip up here, and I'm just going to click left, right. So I just kind of clicked a little bit downwards, and we're moving our way around the leaf, clicking left to right, and we're going to see that it does start to curve. So anytime we need our satin stitch to curve, we want to use our control key to allow those lines to begin to curve. So I'm still clicking straight, and then right about here, I'm holding down the control key, and we're moving, and you can see that those points are now circles. I'm still holding control, and we're gonna take a look after, and we'll see that it has a nice curved shape. So if I wanted to get that leaf, manually digitize it, we can of course always just auto digitize that, but just working on shaping. And then let's see down here, I kind of have a little weird corner. So if I wanted to edit those outlines, I'm just going to drag that out. That looks a little better. We can adjust that angle line, and we can do any editing necessary. So we can just take a look at the top area, and it looks really nice and even. So if we were to bring in, let's say, a different backdrop, and let's say we wanted to make something like this, like where we're making letters or numbers. So using any other stitch type is a lot easier than the satin. So I could easily just trace around this with my complex fill. And if I did want to trace around this with complex, then I also need to create some curves. So we have the same way of creating a curve with our complex fill shape, and that's just going to be me pressing down on that control key to get those lines to curve. So we can do that, and we can finish it off, and there I have a complex fill. The run stitch, we can also do the same, and then of course the satin. So if we wanted to make this in a satin, if I wanted to try and make it like one object, here's how I would do that. So we have to kind of maneuver our shape. So I'm going to start here. So I just clicked up, and now I'm moving upwards. And when I get into this corner, I need to sort of click the point in the same quite a few times. And that's going to allow me, to slowly curve around that bend. And so far, so good. And then I'm just still clicking left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, and final. So what we look at here is in this corner at the bottom of the one, or the top area, I have quite a few points there, and that's because I needed to reach out to the top and have it like slowly move around. So if we zoom in, you can see that I have quite a few here, and I can just sort of edit them as needed around the lines up here. Like maybe I want this to be a line and have it be more straight. So once you're creating, then just go back and make your edits. And here I actually want these lines to be a little bit more straight left to right.
No. No.
Okay.
I mean on the machine, right? Oh no. No. Yeah, no, yeah. The legal fly one, there's no reset.
So, and then we can always, change the density and go from there. So hopefully this was informative. We went through our editing options. When we right click, we can choose what we want to edit. We can add points, we can delete points, we can change points, we can add angle lines, we can change points to line, cusp, symmetrical, or smooth. We can add holes in our complex fill. We can use our artwork tool to create different shapes really easily, like triangles, squares, circles. We can also just manually and using our different stitch tools, we can create straight lines or curves. And the last bit to go over here is that when we are creating curves, we can either use that control key to create a curved line, or we can actually use a Bezier stitch input tool. And so when we talked about the Beziers before, those are those lines that extend onto the point. So this line here. So we can actually create curves using a Bezier input tool. So we're doing that by just clicking on the stitch type we want to use and then using a shortcut key of B. And now when I draw on screen, I'm actually clicking and dragging to create a curve. So I can easily make curves like that instead of making curves by holding control. So we just have two different ways here that we can input our curves. And you can switch back and forth, and there's a shortcut that will give you that Bezier option. And you can actually see at the very bottom left of our screen, we have a little shortcut list that shows us, we can click on C to close off the shape. We can click on Enter or right click to be done. And we can change our mode, which would be the method of inputting your lines and curves. And we have F, S, B, and A. So the B is Bezier, like that, clicking and dragging. The F is actually freehand, where we can just draw on the screen. And the S is where we're using the control key. So S stands for simple draw. The A is just a sort of one-off mode here where it's an arc mode, and it will just create arcs for you. So every couple points that you click on screen, it will curve. So it's a more specified mode there. Learned. And we always answer questions through email. You can always chat in your questions on the live webinars. So if you have any questions or want a refresher or review on anything that we looked over today, please chat that in the box. We do have webinars every week, and the topic will vary. So you can find all of the webinars and topics listed in your customer portal, and you can sign up every week and learn different things. And you can also find plenty of informative instructional videos on the YouTube channel as well. So thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next time.